We're back. Okay, so we're gonna wait one more minute for other people who might be joining. Well, we were talking about how really what I'm trying to talk about is really with all these classes is how we can live a Judaism that's really spiritually alive, and that when you read about the way that it was thousands of years ago in the time of the Bible, it was just part of life, people having experiences and feeling connected, and it was a given. Part of that is it was lost, it became secretive, it became something just passed on. But I do think we're at a time where we're trying to bring that back. And this is what makes religion alive and powerful and meaningful. And so I just wanted to, I guess we'll begin looking at our texts. I just wanted to show how actually all of the basic ideas of Judaism, they've taken on so many different shapes and flavors and developments over time, but how they really are about the spiritual path, how they really are about living this in a powerful way. So the first idea we're going to look about is Shabbat. Shabbat itself, now we think it's about challah and grape juice and wine, but Shabbat is originally was something very, very specific. And Alan, if you're here, I don't know if we can hear you. Do you mind reading for us our first source?
I couldn't get into Google to get the sources, so you're gonna have to ask somebody else.
All right, somebody here. Somebody could read for us.
Here, I'll read it.
All right.
Exodus 19:8, verse 11. Remember the Sabbath day and keep it holy. 6 days you shall labor and do all your work, but on the seventh day, the seventh day is the Sabbath of your God Adonai, you shall not do any work. You, your son, your daughter, your male or female slave, or your cattle, or the stranger who is in your settlements. For in 6 days Adonai made heaven and earth and sea and all that is in them, and then rested on the seventh day. Therefore Adonai blessed the Sabbath day and hallowed it.
Okay, thank you. Alan, I will quickly email you the link. And Norma, do you have a text? Do you have a text, Norma? Well, Barb can't get in either. Oh, it's very small. I'm just gonna say try again. Sorry, everybody. Okay. Okay, so I'm gonna quickly find the link to the materials because they apparently did not go out either.
We couldn't get the materials.
You can get the materials?
No, but this is actually
Last
time,
You
yeah,
got the last one's one?
Yeah.
Okay,
but we didn't get the.
okay, so this is new one. All right, so I'm gonna send to Norma, to Alan, to Barb Young.
Could you send it to me too, please?
Oh, and to Hinda. Hinda's here too. Okay. Wow. Anybody else there? I can't
No.
see it.
That's all.
Okay. All right. I'm sending you the link for the materials.
Okay, so I sent another email out to everybody.
And apparently the
Our
materials
apologies,
didn't work. The
Yeah,
materials didn't
so
work.
I saw that as well.
Okay.
These links all came from the office,
Okay.
from a certain person.
Yeah.
And they're wrong, and
Okay.
I can't change that now, the other link, unless you resend me the link to,
I sent-
send the document.
I sent it to the people's here, to the people here.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, because I can send that out generally,
The-
the document to
The
me.
email I just got your email, Rabbi,
Okay, I sent it to the people
Okay,
here, so
okay,
they have it.
Okay,
All
and
right.
the link, and it opened up just fine.
Journey's link was put into that email instead of the Kabbalah link.
Okay.
So
Okay.
that's what happened, and apologies.
No worries, no worries.
Oh, right, that was the other Sunday class.
Okay. We're here, and that's good. So gonna do very, very quick recap because I have a few more people who joined. And that we're looking at specifically today how to build a Jewish spiritual life, but also holding in us this idea that this was the purpose from the very beginning. Judaism was a path. In Torah times, it was just alive spiritually. And everything that was about it was meant to give us spiritual experience. And much of what was taught later by the rabbis was also to try and keep this alive. It became somewhat secretive, but this is still what we're doing. So we're looking at what's there and trying to show how the spiritual dimension of it and how to turn that into a practice in our lives as well. So we just read the traditional verses about Shabbat, and now we'll read what the Baal Shem Tov says about it. David, you might continue.
Sure. The secret of the Shabbat in the Zohar, Shabbat is a name of the Holy Blessed One. And the rabbi brought in the medieval commentary Rashi, when Shabbat arrives, Menucha, rest, and peace arrives. And the explanation is that God is called Menucha, rest, because there's no movement in the divine. Because movement is only relative to something that is in time and space. But God is Ein Sof, without beginning or end. And God is not moved from place to place, and also not bound by time. And the matter of the Shabbat is that the source is revealed, and the branches long and yearn for it, meaning that Shabbat is a holy day that shines a great emanation from holiness. That is from God, the Holy of Holies, and this illuminates all of creation.
Okay, thank you. So there's what is Shabbat about, right? Shabbat is about, there's a teaching here that one of God's names means rest or peace. And so the Baal Shem Tov also asked somewhere else, well, if God's name is rest, why are we also restless? Why are we so restless, all of us? Why are people so restless? And the answer is because we've forgotten that our nature is to also be in peace and rest. And so Shabbat was meant as one day a week, one entire day a week, where you're just supposed to go back and ground yourself in that place of peace and quiet and restfulness. Not okay to rest from work, but also to find that place inside of yourself. And he's saying that place of rest and peace, that is God. When you can touch that place of peace, you're touching God. You're resting in it and you're connecting to that. And it's a one day a week. And so actually originally all the things now that we think of as Shabbat mainly, which is the challah and the wine and all these things, that came much, much later. They didn't do that at the time of the Torah. And the Torah was just stopping from doing anything. And I mean, it was a little bit austere, and maybe it doesn't work in our life quite as well. But I had a teacher at rabbinical school. He said he wanted to try and just live what that would be like for a while. He stopped doing all the other stuff. He stopped inviting people over for Shabbat because he said, I mean, it's lovely to have people over for Shabbat, but it doesn't mean it's rare to share God with people at Shabbat. You share good food, you share good conversation, you can even share singing, but it's not godliness. And he just said, I'm going to try. And for a whole year, he would just do all the other stuff. He would just not do anything, and he would just really think and sit and contemplate. And kind of like a weekly retreat, a weekly retreat where what you're doing is really trying to connect to that place that's beyond time and beyond space.
Internal to yourself.
Internal to
Very
yourself.
important.
Yeah.
Internal to yourself. It's not out there. It's not out there. What you're looking for is something internal to yourself.
Yes.
And the real question is how you look for that place.
Mm-hmm.
And that's, but for sure you got to be quiet. Okay, for sure if you're being preoccupied by the movement of the world, by your business, etc., you're not going to find that place.
The outer helps the inner, but
I don't know if the outer helps the inner at all, but
it helps a little bit not to be. I mean, on one hand, it's all within the mind, right? One can be one can be very noisy around us, but have silence within. And one can also be in silence, not talking, but being tremendous noise within yourself. That we've all experienced that, where we're by ourselves, but we feel, where are we?
When we were raising our children, we
Yes.
turned the phone off on Saturdays.
That's nice. Yeah.
And it took a while for them to get used to that, and their friends had to get used to that, but they did.
It's really, and even more in these days with the smartphones and everything.
But it isn't only being quiet. I mean,
It's not
last
being
week we
quiet.
talked about, last time we met,
Sure.
you talked about the possibility of a connection through our own consciousness. Okay,
Mhm.
so there's something about your own being, your own I am, your own I am. That if you really look at your own I am, if while you're resting, while you're in a Sabbath situation, you reflect on your own I am, and you keep reflecting on it, what happens is you
Mhm.
reach something that's very interesting, okay?
Mhm.
But it's very difficult to reflect on the reflector. Okay, so you, the person who's thinking, have to think specifically about your thinking. In other words, what's the source of my thinking? How am I able to talk? How am I able to think? If you can do that, and it takes some practice to do that, all of a sudden, something opens up to you, which is really quite interesting.
So this is that's one meditative practice, and we have different practices of meditation. One way that my father speaks about the one that you're talking about is he calls it lech, for giving it a Jewish lens, lech lecha meditation.
Sure,
So lech
sure,
lecha
sure.
means go
Go
to
to
yourself. It was what God said to Abraham. So Abraham said, "Go to yourself." But that's kind of like a meditative practice to keep going to yourself, and you keep asking yourself, well, who am I? What is myself? And if you keep asking that, you don't even have to answer the question. If you keep saying, who am I?
Well,
What is
you're not
myself?
going to be able to
You
answer
said
the question.
you can't,
It
because
turns out it's a self-referential process.
Well, it's
And
referential, but it's also the self is beyond all words and
Right,
beyond all
right,
thoughts.
right.
So you keep saying lech lecha, go to yourself. You can just keep saying that to yourself. That's one
Right,
form of meditation, but there's other forms of meditation too. One can also say the Shema. If you say just the first line of the Shema, and so the Shema Yisrael Adonai Eloheinu Adonai Echad. And actually, when you say the word Echad in Kabbalah and came into traditional Judaism, you're supposed to say Echad and elongate the word one, because it's when you're saying God is one, you're supposed to experience it. It even says you're supposed to say those words. Imagine that your whole being is going out into the whole, joining with all of creation into the oneness. And so there's also, we'll see another form of doing it. But Shabbat was one very concrete way where it was built into the Jewish path to have one day a week where you just try more to connect to that oneness and to that place of divinity and of holiness, right? He calls that the Holy of Holies. Where's the Holy of Holies? It's inside your own self. If you can find the Holy of Holies inside of yourself, then you spend one day trying to find it more in a concentrated form. The rest of your week is going to be completely nourished by that Holy of Holies. And what better way than sure? It's the whole purpose of it. Let's move forward. Anybody have any? Does everybody have it online? I think I sent to everyone the text. Does everybody have the text online?
Yes.
Okay, good.
Hinda, you
Perfect.
don't have it?
Say again?
Hinda, do you have it?
No, I don't. Don't worry about it.
I'll email it
I'll
to you.
just listen.
Oh, Hinda, I did send it to you. So if you check your email, you should have it. Okay. So now, so much of these stories in the Torah are about these characters that had these spiritual experiences, but I think it's even more than that. I think that when you read these stories, it's also, you're supposed to have a little taste of what that experience was like. And actually, what is the purpose of reading a holy text? We read it all the time. We don't even think about it. We think it's about giving you information or making you wise, but really reading any holy scripture, I think of any world religion or any holy text, is you get to have a little taste of what the person who was inspired and who wrote it had when they wrote that text.
I
It's
was
like
going to
you're-
say kind of like
saying-
taking that holy energy into
Yeah,
yourself, kind of drinking it in.
Exactly. It's like you're connecting to it. And actually, this is more about prayers to some extent, but Reb Zalman Shafter Shalomi is a Reconstructionist renewal rabbi, started the renewal movement. What he compared to, I love this, he says it's like freeze-dried coffee. So like all of these texts are like freeze-dried coffee, and you add hot water and you've got coffee. So the hot water is your own soulfulness and your own heart. But it's freeze, it's ready for that.
Well, you get to the, I mean, I think that's a great point. The person that wrote that,
Yeah.
or the people that wrote that, were having an experience while they wrote that.
Mhm.
And the writing of that comes out in this language, which
Mhm.
is for you to be able to read and re-experience the place that person was when they
Mhm.
wrote it. Music works perfectly
right.
like that. When you focus, for example, on really great music, you are in fact having the experience that the composer had
When they were
when he put that-
inspired to
when he-
have it,
when he put
inspired
that
music.
together.
Mhm.
So what you're doing is you're connecting to somebody who's thinking and experiencing that same thing. And that's
Exactly.
sort of cool.
And when we think about Judaism and our tradition of study, so there's one element of it, which is, yes, to keep us smart and to sharpen our minds, but it's also because if you're keeping your mind all the time on these holy texts, you're also connecting to that place where these texts come from. It's part of it creates that. So we have a 1 day a week, which is a day where you're really focused on trying to connect to your Holy of Holies, to your Lecha, to yourself. But then we also have this practice of trying to connect to teaching, to Torah. With the provenance of Torah, right, traditionally is God's, but it's also we're connecting to all of these experiences and stories. So let's go back to our text. If it says, "Let not this book of a teaching cease from your lips, but recite it day and night," it's also about keeping it alive day and night. Those experiences, that vision within ourselves. But then we'll see what the Baal Shem Tov says about what we've been talking about. Somebody else, Jennifer, would you mind reading?
Sure.
4.
When you sit down to learn, think of what it says in the Talmud. God has nothing in this world but the 4 cubits of halacha. And say in your heart, has God not contracted his or her divine being right here into this very space where you are learning? And therefore it is fitting for me to learn with joy, awe, and love. Each hour that you learn, break for a few minutes and link yourself to the Almighty. During your learning, remind yourself before whom you are learning. Keep reminding yourself of the divine presence at every moment and every hour, because the learning process can sometimes distance you from God. That's ironic. When you are learning, for example, a passage from the Talmud that says, Rabbi said, visualize in your mind that Rabbi himself is right there before you saying these words. If you act in this manner, you will draw to yourself the divine livingness from the words and letters of this passage. And afterward, when you recite the teaching that Rabbi said, then the divine livingness will be drawn down upon you from the sifra of understanding, or binah, as you recite and explain the teaching using your own intelligence and understanding. Therefore, bind yourself to the one who originally spoke the teaching, so that the divine livingness enclosed in the teaching will be drawn inside you.
Mhm.
Do you know, there was a guy named Derekh whose father actually formed the Chabad religion. Derekh wrote a book called the Tract on Ecstasy. Anyway, and one of his key meditations in this book is you're to think of the divinity as surrounding and filling, surrounding and filling. And that's what this is sort of leaning on too. So
Wrapping
the-
yourself in
Yeah,
it.
so the divinity actually is around you and fills you. Now, filling is not an abstract thing. You know, when you drink some water, for example, you actually feel the water inside of you. When the divinity decides he's going to knock on your door and he's going to enter you, you're going to feel something. You're going to feel some kind of what people call a spiritual experience. I'm sort of against calling this spiritual because it makes it sound a little flaky. You know, it makes it sound a little non-concrete. But spiritual experiences are very concrete. It's like drinking water, so to speak. Anyway,
Can
Yeah.
be. Well, it's actually also in the Zohar. The Zohar says God fills all worlds and encompasses all worlds.
right, that's the same
And so
thing.
it's this idea. First of all, the God is beyond all of it, but also as you said, I think the God can fill a person and surround the person as well. And I think it's also saying that when that studying is not just an intellectual pursuit, and it can so easily just become an intellectual pursuit. But it should also be you have to make space for the divine to come and fill you, or to surround you as you're doing it. And if not, what's the purpose? I mean, the Ramban Nachmanides, he teaches about Maimonides, who was, the rational philosopher, that whenever he was studying with his children, he would tell his children at the end of studying, he says, do you feel more full of God's love and presence? And if he said no, he would say, go back and study back in the beginning. Because that's the purpose of study, is to feel alive with it. And I think this is such an interesting technique. It says, imagine the person you're studying. So right now we're studying the Baal Shem Tov. So if you imagine the Baal Shem Tov is sitting over there with us, it gives you a different perspective and a different sense. And imagine when you're studying scripture, whatever it is, that to imagine that the people you're reading about are there with you. It makes it much more alive. And it goes back to one of the early stories of how the original Dov Ber, who was the first disciple of the Baal Shem Tov, when he met him for the first time, he heard, or the Baal Shem Tov was the founder of Hasidism, and Dov Ber was the person who eventually took it over. But Dov Ber was a great rabbi who knew the whole Talmud by heart, who knew all the Jewish law by heart. And he heard about some upstart rabbi who was, making a name for himself in another part. So I'm going to go test him out and see what he's made out of. So he traveled and went to see him, and he went to the town. And when he met him, he saw that he didn't seem very impressive to him. He opened the door, and this rabbi, and he said he hoped that he would teach him some Torah. But instead of teaching him some mind-blowing Torah, he started talking about, well, how was your trip, and how are your horses, and this kind of this mind-numbing stuff. And he's like, okay, this is not what I expected. So he went to his room, and later that evening, he again had the same experience. And eventually, he said, this Baal Shem Tov is not what I expected, and I'm going to go and say, I'm ready to leave. I want to go back home, back to all my books. So he went to see the Baal Shem Tov, and finally he met the helper of the Baal Shem Tov, and the helper of the Baal Shem Tov said, follow me. So they went up to the study hall of the Baal Shem Tov. It was a full moon, and so the story says. And then the Baal Shem Tov was there, and he said to him, so you think you can learn? And he said, yes. And he said, well, go read this book. And it was a great Kabbalistic book, and he'd also been trained in Kabbalah, and he knew Kabbalah. And so he sat down and started giving the interpretation. And then the Baal Shem Tov said, you're completely wrong. This is completely wrong. And then he said, well, if it's wrong, you tell me the way it should be learned. And so the Baal Shem Tov spun the book around and started reading from it. But as he started reading from it, as he started talking about angels, the angels appeared experientially, and the house filled up with a holy kind of fire, and the whole thing came alive. And he turned to the Dov Ber and he said, what you were saying, the correct interpretation is the traditional interpretation, but your learning had no soul. And then from then on, he understood that he had something to learn from the Baal Shem Tov. And I said, I think, this is what it's all about, bringing soul to what we're doing. It's very easy to read something and have information, but for it to be alive, to experience it from the inside, is what it's all about. So let's continue. Now we're going to go. Anybody have any comments or thoughts? So, for example, what we're going to be reading from next is the book of Psalms. Just a little quote. But amazing. You read the book of Psalms and traditionally attribute to King David. To imagine the King David is here sitting with us as you're reading it adds an element of life to what we're doing. So the book of Psalms. Who is the man who is? This is just an important verse that people like to sing. Some circles. Mi ha'ish hachofetz chaim. Who is the man who is eager for life, who desires years of good fortune? Guard your tongue from evil, your lips from deceitful speech. Shun evil and do good. Seek amity and pursue it. Right? We have so many texts like this are basically telling us be a good person, right? And we know, don't engage in lashon hara, right? Don't speak ill of other people. Be a good person. We know many of the reasons why we need to be good people. We don't want to hurt people. We create a world where people are kind to each other. These are all really important ideas of why we should be good people. But I don't think it's the end of it. And also there was something very specific in ancient times where the priests, right, the Kohanim, the ones who were in the temple, they had to live extra ethical and moral lives. They had even extra commandments that they had to follow in this regard. And I think it's not only because they were supposed to be extra nice people, but I think as we're going to read that there is something else about this whole spiritual view of life, about what it means to be a vessel for God's presence. That when you're living in a certain way, we talked about it earlier, right? When you're acting in a certain way, that allows you to be a better vessel to be God's presence. And this is the way it's described in this text, which is originally from the Maggid we were just talking about. In that story, the one who learned from the Baal Shem Tov what the soul of learning is. Somebody read for us text number 6.
I'll read.
Suppose that there is a spring that flows high in the hills and far away from a person's fields. In order to bring the water down from the spring to irrigate the fields, the person must first prepare a wide pipe for the water to flow through. And obviously, he must make sure that there are no cracks or holes in the pipe or anything else that might block the flow of the water. Because if he gets lazy and does not keep his eye on the pipe to make certain it is in good condition, then all his efforts will be for nothing because the water will leak out and never reach his fields at all. Once he has prepared the pipe, then the person must very carefully place the pipe right next to the spring so that it becomes joined to the spring with a tight and thorough bond. He must make certain that there is no separation between the pipe and the spring, not even a hair's breadth, because if he doesn't, then all his work and efforts will be for naught.
So this is the vision of so much of the ethical teachings are also, if we're a good person, we're making sure that our pipes for God's blessing into the world, we're the pipes, right? We're the pipes. If we're good people, then our pipes don't have holes in them and the blessing doesn't go this way. And if we're working hard to fix our pipe to the divine pipe, and we're the vessels for bringing God's power into the world and God's blessing into the world, and how we act in the world. And the same thing with the priests of ancient times, right? They were the ones who were in the temple who were doing this work, and they had to do it at an extra level to be able to be good vessels for God's presence. And so, of course, it's important to be good because we want to create a kind world and create a world of kindness. But also all those things are how we create ever wider and bigger and good vessels for God's work and blessing in the world.
It's interesting that the
Yeah.
metaphor used here is water.
Yes.
Okay, So and in fact, this is very, very often in the Torah and other places where to connect to God, it's to feel the divine spring. You know,
Sure.
there's lots and lots of water metaphors. What is that? What is water something that we should be close to experiencing when we're inside or when we're in this state of mind? Is it like drinking something, or is it like something passing into you that feels watery? And there is something like that, okay? So it turns out that these experiences must be concrete. You must actually feel this. If you're just thinking water, and it becomes just conceptual, it's worthless. So it actually has to feel like water. You know, sometimes you take a shower in the morning, and it really feels good to have the shower hit the top of your head. Well, what is that thing? Well, that's part of this experience that they're talking about. So we, as a physician, I was always sort of distressed that, well, I used to be a physician. So anyway, but when I used to be a physician, I was very distressed that people, if they had this, any kind of a physical experience, for example, in their head, okay, suppose they had a watery experience in their head, okay, immediately they would run to the doctor, because in our culture, that's taught as a sign either of a brain tumor or something like that, or God forbid, madness. So spiritual experiences have gotten a very bad rap inside our culture. So if you have water coming into you from sources that you can't see, this is something that you should welcome and try not to be so frightened of.
Well, I think it's true, and I'll add that I think everybody's also made differently. And Kabbalah has this interesting teaching of, so we have a right-hand side and a left-hand side in Kabbalah. We have, and the left-hand side is considered to be the side of spiritual prophecy and of spiritual experience. And some people are just born with a very strong side that's like that. And I mean, they have very concrete experiences of spiritual experiences. And it's true, there's some people, you know, they'll go to the kotel, and the first time they go to the kotel, they're wow, they have, or all kinds of things. Sometimes it's too much, and sometimes it leads them to also become unbalanced, you know. And there's other people who don't have these experiences. It's very hard for them to have spiritual experiences. And Kabbalah says that's because they're more on the right-hand side. And that's not a bad thing. The right-hand side has many benefits to it too. So, you know, for some people, if you're a person for whom spiritual experience comes easy, that's a wonderful thing. And then your challenge is not to let it kind of unground you. And if your makeup is it's harder for you to have spiritual experience, that means that you're naturally grounded, which also is a good thing. And then you just have to work a little bit harder to have that spiritual experience and really go to that place of meditation or of this. And I think you know there's wonderful experiences in water. I mean, the Zohar talks about that at midnight there's a stream that comes down from Eden for those who are able to experience it. The stream that's flowing down from the Garden of Eden, and you can experience it if you're in it's the Shekhinah or different ones. I think it's not just the midnight, but so I think there's different ways. But I would also say to people, if you don't experience it, it doesn't mean that it's not happening too. And if you are experiencing it, then don't worry about it. It's a good thing.
You know, it's in other
Yeah.
religions too. Like, for example, in yoga practice, the bindu is a place on the top of the head where the dew of the divinity or the dew of the absolute comes in. This is yoga practice. So, you know, it isn't this isn't only Hebrew stuff.
Right.
This is all human beings
Sure.
who have this. Look at the headdresses of different cultures. Well, why do Indians have all of this paraphernalia on their headdress, or the Buddhists, or people who wear a yarmulke? What's doing there? This is sort of to draw attention to this area
Well, there's
as a place where things happen to you.
Well, there is. I mean, we talked about this in our Thursday morning class, but the practice of anointing the head with oil, right?
Sure.
Which is kings and queens, and there's a psalm where it says, like God anointing my head with oil. But
I was thinking about with the water, we're talking about that for
Yeah.
a while, and with you know, the mikvah in Judaism
Sure.
or baptism in Christian religions, and something about the immersion in water. Maybe it has to do with the water's quality of flow and the idea of
Exactly.
flowing into you or flowing around you. The
Or
energy of
the, or
water.
the surrounding and filling, the filling notion.
Right,
I
you
mean,
get filled with water.
there's so many of these so-called, people think of them as metaphors,
Mhm.
but they start off as concrete experiences and then become metaphors much later on as
Mhm.
language develops.
Sure.
Cleansing and purification.
Yeah,
Or there's-
these are all real, these are
Mhm.
all experienced as real things in
Yeah.
the beginning. That's what the rabbi is trying to point out, is
Mhm.
the path in the ancient days was much more realistic than
I
it
think-
is now.
And I think in some, it's realistic. This is a religion begins with experiences, and then people lose touch and they start to theorize, and it all becomes
It all becomes abstract.
it becomes abstract, and then there's some benefit to it, which it appeals to a much wider group, and that religion takes people and pass billions of people, right? And so it has some, but the other famous story of the Baal Shem Tov, right, that they say is, right, the Baal Shem Tov used to go to some place in the forest where he would talk to God, and then the generation after knew where the place was, and they would go there, but they weren't able to hear God's voice, but they would still talk to God. And then the next generation knew that there was a place, but they stopped talking to God. And the one knew that there was some place in the forest where people used to go, and eventually it started to become, well, it wasn't really in the forest, it was somewhere up there. And this is the way religion works, right? You, generation after generation, you lose touch with the experience, and it becomes something more and more in the abstract.
Rabbi, that sounds like a much nicer story around how events become something really important than the joke that you often tell us about, the person who,
Oh, yes.
or the habit of being called up to the Torah and making
Yes.
the detour, and nobody knew why.
Yeah, bending his head, nobody knew why. Because eventually asked someone in the old shul before this one, there was a chandelier above the bima, so you had to bend your head when you went up for the aliyah. That's why people. But I do think that's what happens. That's the power of custom and the power of. But to some degree, those customs are also like the pipes, and I will say that to some degree, customs are like transferring a pipe to the next generation, because you get something out of that pipe. That's what a custom is, right? A custom is you do a custom and you receive some kind of blessing from doing this, and you see. I mean, I get it, I don't always. Sometimes there's too much focus. Oh, I remember seeing my grandfather making kiddush, and it was so special, kind of thing. But one of the reasons is you felt something was happening when I was doing it, and you're trying to recreate it in your own way, and you're kind of trying to take their pipe and bringing it into making it your pipe, and that's part of the beauty of tradition, right? It was alive for them, and you felt that it was alive, so you're trying to make it alive for you, and because it's alive for you, you're trying, and that's how things are transmitted. So if you see in our secular society, if you lose touch with some of those means of connecting to blessing, then it's not always so easy to find it, and it's easy to not have anything. And so religion also is a kind of time and trusted way of passing it down. But the problem is that then some of those ways come together with a whole package, which is also negative, which is all, can become dogmatic and become, rigid and stuck. And then if you're coming from an ultra-Orthodox world, their religious practices are powerful, right? But it's coming with, okay, this is the way we think about the place of women in religion, or it's coming with, you have to absolutely believe this, or you're not going to be able to connect. And I think the challenge is how you can have those practices and that bounty come your way, but with an open mind as well, which is how we're trying to
But
do.
during the week, your pipes, so to speak, get clogged up with
That's
all
true.
sorts of things. Then on Saturday, you try to clean them out.
Yeah, exactly.
And I think it gets easier as you get older because you don't have the week of clogging your pipes up with childcare and cooking and whatever
And your
comes with it.
and your weekends are less clogged with childcare too.
Yeah.
But every time there's different other blessings. Your pipes get enlivened in other ways with childcare and other things too. So I think it's a great segue to the next one, which is there's a few more. So we talked about this last time, this image, right? One of the goals of spiritual Judaism is this idea of stitching tikkun olam, right? We talk about tikkun olam, fixing the world, those stitching the world together. The literally all Jewish practices, where we had a text, which was you're stitching the Holy One, blessed be He, and the Shekhinah, which was like the whole part of being a Jew is bringing together body and soul, right? We're bringing together spirit and matter, bringing together everything. This is part of, right? We came out of this, we were talking about last time in the big idea of the Jewish spiritual life. We're out of the garden, but part of what we're doing here in this world is bringing the garden here. We're trying to make this world more spiritualized. And every time when our pipes are working well, then we're doing that. We're making this world more alive and more spiritualized. And the way that that's expressed in Jewish Kabbalah is we're unifying the Holy One, blessed be He, and the Shekhinah. We're bringing together matter and form. And so we have this practice, which is to say a simple phrase before every time you do a mitzvah. This is a Kabbalistic phrase, the Shem Yichud Kudsha Brichu Shchinte, which means I'm doing this for the sake of the unification of the Holy One, blessed be He, and the Shekhinah. And so it's kind of saying every religious thing that I'm doing with a purpose, a kavanah, which I'm trying to make this world more whole, right? I'm trying to make this world more united. I'm trying to bring the Holy One, blessed be He, and the Shekhinah. And some people say it before every single Jewish act. So right here we have, this is just a photocopy from an Israeli Siddur, a mainstream Israeli Siddur that's Sfarad. And this is a kavana that you're supposed to say before you put on tefillin. There's the Hashem Yichud Kudsha Brichu Shchinte Tchilu Richimu Hashem. And Israeli Siddurim have a lot more space in them because you don't have all the translation into English. So they put a lot more of this stuff. But a lot of English Siddurim also have this. All the Chabad ones have this stuff. And so this is Elimelech of Lizinsk, who was a Hasidic Rabbi. This is how he describes this practice. Somebody else read this for us, number 8.
And in all matters in this world, be it study, be it prayer, be it active spiritual acts, mitzvot, he should habituate himself to say these words. I am doing this for the sake of the unification of the Holy One, blessed be He, and the Shekhinah, in order to bring pleasure to God. And he should habituate himself to recite this in the inner depth of his heart, and with time, he will experience a great illumination with this recitation.
So there's two levels for this. One is just a little easy thing that one can say. If you just were to say this, even in English, before you do any kind of thing, before you do challah, before you do wine, before you do any things, one element is, I think it can bring a sense of powerful experience to one's own acts, but it also reminds us that what we're doing is not only for ourselves, but we're doing this for the whole world. And this is also the imagery of the pipes is your pipe isn't only to bring blessing to yourself, but to irrigate the fields down below, right? That's what it said, right? You're trying to bring blessing into the world. And by doing this, you're also, it's like everything Jewish you're doing, you're trying to fix the world. You're trying to tie this world together, spirit and matter, body and soul, everything you're doing.
What's the metaphysics of this in the sense, I mean, this is a notion that the world is what, split? Or that there was a problem in creation and that it's our task as human beings to somehow put this together. I mean, that's what it sounds like, but it could also be that the divinity, I mean, which is sort of what I kind of feel from time to time, that the divinity, in order to have experience, because the divinity doesn't have experiences, right? The divinity is sort of, nothing's really happening with the divinity. There's no time, there's no space, there's no extension, there's nothing there. So the divinity, in order to have experiences, makes this huge creation. And in making the huge creation, all, or at least in humans, what happens is he makes a copy of himself, or he makes a copy of his intellect and puts it into humans. So, we humans are hanging around here trying to figure out what we are, what kind of beings we are, what we're doing, and we sort of discover that there's some connection between us and the divinity. That we're actually, in our intellects, not very different from the divinity.
I think what you're saying is that something about being being a human being also means that we exist in the physical world where we bring the divine into this physical world to some degree.
Yeah, we do. But is there a task involved in this?
So
what's needed for us?
I mean, the metaphysics are at two levels. One, there is this idea that the whole world was shattered and then sparks went everywhere, and part of being a human being is to raise the sparks in everything we do. But there is also an idea that we're not just human beings alone living our little lives in this world, but we're part of a huge interconnected web of the life stretching everything in this world, everything in all worlds and higher heavens and everything. We're part of something, and this is not a static world, but it's a world in motion. It's a world that's organic in its own way. Everything is moving and shifting. And in our particular little corner of this world, which is a world that's very concrete and physical, a world of matter, we happen to have the ability to bring spirit into this world. And part of our task is to, bring more spirit into our concrete world. But at the same time doing it, we're also reflecting much greater movements in the cosmos of trying to, on some level, there's a place in the cosmos where God is in perfection and God is in complete silence and unity. But as it comes down, I mean, this is powerful stuff. As it comes down more and more through the more concrete worlds, everything is in movement. And we have a task in this world. And our task is to help those cosmic movements come into unity, bring everything into oneness.
So it's like the Buddhist notion that the world expands, the divinity. Well, it's sort of a pantheistic notion that the divinity is the universe, and the universe expands and then it contracts, and it takes billions and billions of years to expand and billions of years to contract. So we're in the phase, if we're trying to
That's
do
Hindu,
your thing.
Hindu thought as
Yeah,
well,
right.
so,
We're trying to work the contraction. We're part of the whole fabric of the whole thing, which I think is a wonderful idea.
I think that it's a lot of wishful thinking. I'm much more pessimistic about our abilities. But Rabbi,
yes.
what is here? I'm doing this for the sake of the unification of the Holy One, blessed be He, and the Shekhinah. We are our religion is monotheism. We have only one God. How can we separate Him to Shekhinah and to Holy One? And that means that we are breaking our main tenet of having one unit of God.
Well, this is a big topic, but I think this is the basis of why Kabbalah, you had to be older to learn it, because it's but every Kabbalistic text begins, and even the parts in the Kabbalah that are the most like this, they begin by saying all of it is a unity. Don't forget that. Everything is a complete unity, but from our vantage, we're not beings who live in that unity. The way we experience it is not as a unity, but it's really all a unity. So it's a means for us to understand better. Look, when you're praying, right? You're praying, and let's say you're having a wonderful prayer, you're experiencing God on some level, right? But
Never.
what's that?
I never experienced that.
You never are completely into it. You
No,
never
ever.
have.
No, I have a desire, but I never.
But I see
I
you,
never deceived
Vladimir.
myself.
I see you pray with kavanah, and I think you're
Yes,
experiencing
but
something.
but it's
but-
entirely. I do
but-
not make
But
any illusion that I reached something which is unreachable.
but I think, well, from my point of view, I think that
How
if
do
you
you
weren't,
know it's unreachable?
but let me stop. If you weren't experiencing something, you would stop doing it. And I think the
That's
fact
right,
that
yeah.
when you're doing it, the fact that you're getting something, and I see you, daven of kavanah, you enjoy it, you feel, what is
Okay.
that? That's not coming from,
No.
that's coming from this. Let me just finish, and it's okay if we had different views on it, but I think you're experiencing God at that moment, and that's why you enjoy it, and that's why you keep coming back day after day, because you're experiencing God while you're davening. And so what is that experience, and how is that different than the God that's, timeless, boundless in the heavens? It's all unity, but from our point of view, trying to understand what it is, maybe we experience it as different parts of the same unity. And that's what Kabbalah is
It's
saying.
totally, I live in the material world,
Yes.
and as a person of material world, I cannot deceive myself that I somehow was able to overstep the limitation of my essence of the mortal human being.
What about your other essence, the immortal soul?
We have, when we sing a song,
Yes.
we believe in what we are trying to get.
Yes.
But that doesn't mean that we are able to catch it. It's just a blue bird, which is, we would never stop doing this. That's in our genes, because we live in a totally unrecognizable world if we do not achieve, if we not get entangled with something which is
Eternal.
eternal.
Exactly.
Right,
Exactly.
right.
If you don't get entangled with
But
something
again,
eternal.
returning to this,
Wait,
this is just, how can they say the Holy Blessed and the Shekinah? Holy Blessed cannot,
Okay.
one and
It's
one
the
is
same
not,
thing.
is
It's the
one.
same thing.
Listen, human beings
It's just
divide
different
things
words
into
for the same
subjects and objects, okay? Our mind works so that we always have a subjective view and we look at something objective. So we split things into two things all the time. We can't open our mouths without creating that split. We can't talk about anything without creating that split. Now, but the whole notion of this stuff is that deeply inside of us, that split is actually a unity. That thing that we're splitting through speech is a unity.
So what you are trying to tell me that 1 + 1 is equal to 1?
No, I'm not trying, when you speak it, this is the kind of unity that you can experience, you can't experience in speech.
I do not accept it, but I will tell
Vladimir,
you what.
I'll give you a different image. But then I do want to move on. Yourself, Vladimir,
Yes,
or any of us, we're one being, but
right,
we're made out of trillions of, I don't know how many cells we are in different parts of our body, but
Right.
our body is a unity, right? There's one spirit, or one, even if we don't want to say it's a spirit, I control my fingers and my hands and my this, and I have one thing which is me, but there's many different parts to me. There's many different
No, but
parts that
that's
work in unison. So-
You just mix it. These are all material, but we have only one soul. The soul is undivisible.
But the soul,
We cannot, if we have many souls, then we become a subject for a mental institution. because
we have one soul, but all of our souls together, and all the life contained in our universe that's behind the physical
But
life.
that
and all
sounds
the
like
spirit.
Ansky's play about the book. Where they believe that you can have soul of another person. It is.
There's no other soul. I mean, this is the Torah. I mean, this is our. I mean, I think this is not important. 'Cause-
I think
wait,
that
let me
I want
finish,
to
let me finish.
one word.
Let me
One
just
word.
finish. You can do
I
afterwards.
accept religion and
This
as
is
a
religion.
poetry. It's a poetry. It's a step from the material world to
Yes.
our wishful desire to overstep the limitation of our human existence.
Okay, well, if that's how you see religion and God, then there's not going to be a bridge, I don't think. But I would say that anyway, if next time you go to a musical Shabbat and you're really enjoying it and feeling something, in my mind, what you're feeling is not just something happening within your own self, but there's something happening. If not, you wouldn't come back to it.
You're a lucky person. I'm not.
So, no, I think. And in the end,
Let me say
let's
one
move
thing
on.
about, let
Let's
me
move
say
on.
one thing too,
Okay.
is that
This is a
you're taking
group of
for
people saying only
granted
this one thing.
something that you've been taught. Okay, you're taking for granted something that you've been taught. And what you're taking for granted is that it's not possible to reach something divine. You're taking that for granted. You're taking that as a given, okay? So you're not reflecting on that. Destroy that thought for yourself. It is possible. Think to myself, it is possible to reach something divine. It is possible. And maybe your attitude will change, because what you have to do in this whole process is you have to do a lot of self-deconstruction, okay? You have to take all the things that you've been taught, all the things that are so obvious to you, like, for example, it's obvious you can't reach the divine, and you have to blow that up. You have to destroy that for yourself and see what's left.
That would be a big case of megalomania.
No, well, it isn't. That's okay.
Anyway, let's move on. Let's move on.
That's a
I
whole
think-
other issue.
I
That's
think
very.
I think it was
but
a
that's
useful
very
conversation, but
interesting.
I do.
That's very interesting.
But maybe to conclude the conversation, I'll say however you experience it, whether you experience it as poetry or the other, I think it doesn't matter. I think it's all the point of, anyway, we're in a class about Kabbalah and about spiritual matters. This is it. This is what we're talking about. Let's move forward. And to the idea that Bonnie was talking about earlier about, well, you have one day a week where you're trying to connect back to all of it. But on the other hand, Psalm says, I place Adonai before me always. And so how do you do this? How do you stay connected to this source within you at all times?
Can I say
Sure.
one word about it?
Sure, of course.
Gratitude.
Okay, beautiful.
I mean, I feel like when you have a sense of gratitude, that is God making their presence known, because you have this capacity to not just, I'm sitting here in this room with these intelligent people listening to conversation, having talk about the scriptures and the biblical sources, but I am feeling a joy. And I feel like that is definitely, and maybe that's just me, but it manifests itself that way, as a kind of a sense of gratitude and the joy that comes from the gratitude.
Beautiful.
So you're feeling a sense of joy.
I
And the
am right
sense of
now.
joy is a physical thing.
Sure it
Right.
is.
So
Yeah.
so that's your water.
There's a
That's-
warmth. There's a
warmth that comes. That's the water that's coming at
Well,
you. And you feel it as joy.
Mhm.
And I feel it as a sense of connection.
Yeah, in the sense of
All
joy.
of us here
Well,
and there too.
beautiful. Well, I think that gratitude is also intrinsically linked to humility, because gratitude is saying, it's not just about me. I am grateful for something else. And the second you make yourself small, and you make room for something else to come in.
Mm,
And that's,
Interesting.
and that when you the base of humility, if you can fill your entire being, and your being is very, very big. If you fill your entire being with yourself, then there's no room. I mean, the Baal Shem Tov says, if you fill yourself with yourself, there's no room for God. But if you make yourself very small, then there's room for God to come in.
That's
There's room
why
for God to-
pride has always been one of the primary sins in most, not necessarily in Judaism, but in Catholicism. Pride is the primary sin, because with pride, you're filling yourself with your image of yourself, or with other people's reflected images of you, and therefore you're not leaving any room for something else to enter.
Well, gratitude and humility and having pride is in some ways a really easy way of doing it. It speaks, I think, in a concrete way to many of us, but there's many different ways. And I have here the imagery of how do you actually hold on to it? There needs to be a conscious effort to hold on to it. I mean, we're supposed to say 100 blessings a day, right? 100 blessings a day are all about gratitude, all about connection. And what is it like? And this is one of my favorite Hassidic texts. My dad, from my father, a lot of this from my father. But so let me read for us, source number 10.
If a person holds in their hand or pocket a large gem worth thousands of gold coins, which is precious beyond value, then whatever other business transactions they are occupied with, they most definitely will not forget the gem, because the other transactions are not worth even a fraction of the value of the gem. Similarly, if the awe of heaven is important in the eyes of a person, like a precious gem or a lovely treasure, because so it's important in the eyes of a person like a precious gem or a lovely treasure, because the awe of God is their treasure, then even when they are occupied with business matters or any other of their worldly affairs, they will not forget about or cease for even a moment from their awe before God. That's wonderful. How could you hold on better to the remembrance of the divine?
You know, this idea, if it's, when I teach this, sometimes I say, if you had a $1 million diamond in your pocket, you would not forget about it all day long. You would be, if you were talking to somebody, you would still be thinking about that diamond in your pocket. If you were, if you're running on the street to try and catch the bus, or you would be thinking about it, you would always be thinking about it, because we know how important it is. And so if we give even a little bit of that value to that sense of connection, then we'll be thinking about it, and our minds will be on it. And just the fact of our minds being on it, you're on it, you're connected. That's
This may be the utility of the yarmulke, actually, as you're feeling this on your head all the time. And as you're feeling this on your head, it sort of recreates for you some kind of a subliminal spiritual experience.
I wish it was. Someone who wears a yarmulke all day long. I don't think
Well, I see you're touching it a lot. You must be fiddling with yourself there.
What about
Yeah.
the tefillin
Well,
would that be doing this, have the
well, I think-
same
Yeah, sure.
purpose? The wrapping of the,
Yeah, but you don't do that all day.
The
No.
tzitzit. It's really the tzitzit. The tzitzit are that, because the tzitzit are meant as that, right? It says in the Torah, you have your tzitzit. They used to wear them all. People still wear them all.
sure, yeah.
You shall look at it and you shall remember the commandments. And right, and if you look at the tzitzit, I wish I had my tali with me now. You're supposed to have a thread of blue on it, right? So what was the thread of blue for? It says the thread of blue is like the color of the sea, of the heavens, right? The expansive feeling, and of the throne of glory. When you're looking at you're supposed to have the thread of blue with you, and you look at it, and now it reminds you of a sense of expanse, of kind of taking yourself out of the narrow places we so easily get caught in throughout our day. So that's another meditation. You can go throughout your day, and when you're feeling constrained or disconnected, You just close your eyes and think of the wide open sky and think of that brilliant blue, which they say is the color of heaven. And we have so many things that take up our days. You're paying your bill and you think, oh yeah, this is complicated. Why did they send me the wrong bill? Close your eyes and think about the color, the blue color of the sky, and take yourself to a more connected place.
Yeah, there's huge numbers of distractions that keep us from thinking about this thing. And huge numbers of distractions, and they're very hard to get over. It's almost like you need to have a little bit of a talisman, something that you like, the gold, like the thing in your pocket,
Mhm.
like the diamond.
Yeah.
Right.
That you can
To bring
reflect
you
on.
back
Yeah, that's
to
right,
it.
Terry, that you can reflect on a regular basis.
Mhm.
Rabbi, if I could add,
Sure,
it's
go ahead.
it's like
Barb.
that, it's like that commercial that everything has value, but something is invaluable.
Yeah,
And to
priceless,
me,
yeah.
all the material things in the world have a value. You can put a value on it, but your spirituality, your connection to God, your connection to family, love, the temple, whatever it is, it's invaluable. There's almost no way to measure it because it's so immense, and it does go right to your core, right to your soul. So to me, it's invaluable as opposed to having a concrete value.
Beautiful, thank you. Right there is that line here where he says, like, because the awe of God is their treasure. So that's a choice, right? You have to choose to make that your treasure, right? So if you say, well, all these things I have, they're wonderful, but what's most important is that love of family and of God, of this, then that's also what you're making that choice. You're putting that value in it, and that's allowing you to then shift your whole life in that way. All right, we have time for maybe one or two more. So the next one. So what is the most traditional Jewish way of keeping connected? It's prayer, right? But prayer so easily becomes, rote, and so easily becomes, there's something that feels passive. I mean, this is the Hassidic idea of what prayer should look like, and I think we'll read it and then move on to the last one. In prayer, you must put all your strength into the pronunciation of the words, source 11, and you shall go from letter to letter until you forget your physicality, and you think that the letters are combining and joining one to the other, and this is a great joy. If also in the material there is a joy, how much more so in the spirit? And this is the world of formation. And afterwards you'll come to letters of thought, and you will not hear what you are saying. It's because you have come to the world of creation. Then you come to the attribute of nothingness, that all your physical powers, senses are annihilated. And this is a world of emanation, absolute attribute of wisdom. So it's a movement. There's prayer can, we've really taken on, not to be judgmental, but we've taken on a lot of the aspects of German Protestant prayer, right? This is where a lot of the prayer of the Reform and Conservative movement came from. It's a little bit, you sit down in services, and there's a high bima, and that's the way prayers were in Germany, and it kind of came here, and Jews here also wanted to copy everybody else. But prayer should be forgetting your physicality. You should feel in our own Jewish way of doing that. You should really, and I think there's sometimes we're able to do it, when we dance, is sometimes we kind of forget about it and we just kind of really enjoy it, and the sense of joy. So there's a progression here he's talking about. You go to feeling a sense of joy, and when you're dancing at a wedding in joy, you don't think about, at a certain point you forget about the awkwardness of dancing, and at a certain point you forget about it, and you're just in it, right? And then there's another level where he's saying where you just experience kind of a sense of total kind of losing yourself in it, of nothingness, and that's really what you're aiming for in prayer.
Completely absorbed.
Completely absorbed, yeah.
You can try music too.
Mhm.
I've been listening personally to the collected works of Corelli. And this is heavenly music. So what I do is I lie down on my bed and I play this music and I focus on it. Okay, I think of nothing while I'm listening to the music. So the music in some sense is playing me. Okay. And as the music is playing me, what's happening is I'm experiencing what the composer wrote, the composer's connection to that particular thing that he transformed into music and brought to me. Now, this is not praying in a synagogue. I don't pray in a synagogue much, but I do.
You
but
should
I
come
do-
to our musical
Yeah,
Shabbats.
Yeah,
but,
musical
yeah.
Shabbat's
But,
very
no,
good.
but this you can do on your own.
Right.
You can do it on your own.
Yeah,
And you can do it for as long as you want.
it takes you
And
on a
it- and it's-
spiritual journey.
Oh,
for
for sure. It's
Right.
wonderful stuff. And,
Right.
and it takes a certain amount of discipline to dismiss all of the thoughts all of the thoughts that seem to come into your head in the beginning that have nothing to do with the music.
Mhm.
So you don't want to be
Sure.
thinking about anything.
You
And
wanna-
it's the same, it's a form of prayer, but it's a form of prayer that's very sort of isolated.
It's like a meditation.
Yeah.
So this is the basic good thing we're mentioning of practice of the Hasidic nigun, right? From musical Shabbat, when we stop saying words and we go nine, nine, nine. What is that? That's a practice where you're going beyond words,
Mhm.
because words are still expressing ideas, and you're just in the moment, right?
Feeling it.
You're just feeling it, or you're repeating the same siman tov, or mazel tov, even that, but you're just feeling it, and it allows you to take beyond. And we have so many words, and how can you think about every single word? You're thinking about it, you're not in it. So when you just say nine, nine, nines, and that's why in our musical Shabbat we sing it, and then at a certain point we stop singing the words and we just say nine, nine, nines, because then you're progressing to the place where it's just sound, and you're just able to so much easier just be in the moment and be with it. And the Hasidic Kabbalistic idea was when they were, some were saying earlier, when they were inspired with a melody, right? And something they would say the melody falls into their head. When you're singing again, you're going back to the place where the melody comes from, right? You're going back to the place. So it's that's why I think that the melody, the people who compose the Hasidic melodies and other spiritual melodies are not just like other music or people who are inspired. I think the classical musicians are also inspired. They're inspired music, and so when you're singing them, you go back to that place of inspiration. And it's different because there's something added with the music, which is where they are when they hear this music. It's literal, it's very concrete. They're in that place, they hear this music, and then they bring the music, and then when you're singing it, you're going back to that place. It can be very healing as well. And so we'll very quickly read the last one. The Baal Shem Tov. Will somebody read this for us? 13. Bonnie, yeah.
And his thought should always be bound to the supernal world in God. And this is the hidden meaning of the verse in the Torah. And from the temple he shall not go out. And when he speaks at length about worldly matters, his thought should be that he is journeying from the higher world below. Like a person who leaves his house and goes outside with the intention to come right back. While he is on the way, he thinks, when will he return to his home? So he, the Hasid, should be thinking always of the supernal world, that there is his real home in God.
So this is similar to the idea of the jewel, but it's how you can go about your life thinking, where is my home? Spending your whole time thinking same as Lech Lecha, same as all of these,
Your
it's
spiritual home.
Are these words by Baal Shem Tov or of his disciples?
this is the Baal Shem Tov. Yeah,
So what these are original words.
these are his original
So
words.
some of his
Disciples wrote it down.
disciples wrote
Yeah.
Your home is everywhere.
Your home is everywhere, and everywhere is in your home, but you shouldn't forget to be in your home when you're everywhere.
Mhm.
And that's
Yeah, there's a practical world too.
Yeah.
there's a
And-
practice
and-
when you
yeah,
have to live in it.
And
Yeah.
one of the things, when you get into this stuff was forbidden for people who were under 35, who weren't
40,
married
40, yes.
and didn't have a mortgage. You have to have a mortgage on your house to be into this stuff because that keeps you grounded. Okay, otherwise what happens is you get too taken. And
Uh-huh.
with yourself too. Suppose you have one of these spiritual experiences, you say, wow, I must be very, very special that this is happening to me. You have to, you have to sort of tone that
That's true.
stuff down completely. And otherwise, you're gonna stop with your spiritual experience.
I used to
And
have to
nothing
keep
more
it
is
in
gonna
mind,
happen to you.
Pay the
I know, I
mortgage.
can say, but part of it also, and I think that we're in the period in this world where there's a lot of this happening. And one of the benefits of traditional religion is it does offer protection in that regard because it has boundaries, and also having a teacher. And I think this is one of the things that gets missed in our world. Is when you explore this, and as you're saying, if you have a spiritual experience, a teacher will say, okay, you think you're great, but that was one drop in the bucket.
Sure.
And if you don't, when you don't have a teacher, then you're like, wow.
Well, and
So
my
it's
cousin
yeah,
Jimmy
yeah.
had this spiritual experience, and
Uh-huh.
all of these guys had the same spiritual experience. So how
Yeah.
are you special?
Yeah,
How
and
are you
it's, and
special?
it's,
For me, I'm sorry to say personally, I feel that it's a sign of my unjustified pride that I, in comparison with anybody else, was able to reach divine. I believe in God. I wrote a book about this, and I write why I believe in God. But my own religious activity is because I try to reach God, but not penetrate by any iota the secret of his existence.
Vladimir, I think I said this before, but I really think that if you're yearning for God, that yearning itself is connecting to God and giving you spiritual food. And if you weren't receiving spiritual food, you would just stop
Maybe.
because there's no way you would continue day after day. So
But
I
I'm
think you're.
modest in my
it's, But it's a
side.
beautiful idea, and we all frame it in different ways, but we all experience it in different
You
ways.
should read. Franz Kafka has a wonderful little part.
Thank you. I just want to say
in one
thank
of
you,
his
everyone.
books.
Our next one is in 2 weeks, and then we'll be talking about the collective experience of seeking out all of this. Thank you for joining, and so nice as always to be together. And
Look,